Welcome to a scenario where the world's developed and developing countries go to war. This is going to be an all-out war till the end, basically until one side surrenders/capitulates. This war is going to keep on going. Will the wealth of these developed nations carry them to victory? Or will the sheer numbers of these developing countries cause them to emerge on top? Pick a side, root for it, and overall, enjoy. Now, one thing before we begin, I do understand that the line between developed and developing for countries is pretty ambiguous, so you can see my source. Let's just jump straight into the scenario. The United States has made several gains in various regions across the Americas. We see that they quickly wiped out the Caribbean, and with the help of Canada and some European nations such as France, we see that they've gone into Guyana and Suriname, a bit of Venezuela, taken both of these countries basically out of the war, and they've also taken control of Panama, and with that, the Panama Canal, as well as Costa Rica. And as they march into Nicaragua and solidify their control over Guyana and Suriname, a key theme of the US's strategy and the overall developed nations' strategy in this region is established. They're trying to take out the weaker nations first, as a way of establishing momentum and gaining quick ground. In the Middle East, we see that these developed regions are being taken over simply because they're surrounded by many more of these developing countries. We see that, they're basically surrounded. And we see Turkey start to make some gains into Greece. However, the advance by Turkey is stopped by various of these European nations over here. And these nations in particular have a plan. They aim to divide and conquer the Balkan region. And in turn, this would allow the European nations, the developed ones, to gain a more strong and solid foothold over this entire area. Yeah, those are just the plans, but is that going to be the reality? We see developed European troops march into Hungary and Croatia, to which they are at first met with extreme success. Italy marches straight into Albania and conquers nearly the entire country, and overall, the Western Europeans, a lot of these developed nations, have secured the Adriatic coast. Kaliningrad, which is surrounded, is conquered. And Eastern Europe begins an invasion of Belarus and Ukraine, which goes pretty well until they reach a stop because of Russia. In East Asia over here, South Korea begins a rapid invasion of North Korea. This goes pretty well because South Korea is a top 5 power, whereas North Korea, on the other hand, is much lower in the rankings, so they're quickly brought to the border with China. Japan sends many of its troops to invade into the Philippines because they have a plan. They hope to connect up with Australia and try to gain some Indonesian land, and overall try to create a unified Eastern Front. The developing countries also have a strategy, which is going to make the plan of Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan over here to link up with Australia and New Zealand. That's not going to be as easy as it sounds, because in the eyes of the developing world, Australia and New Zealand are pretty cut off from many of their allies, and that is going to be detrimental. New Caledonia, French land, is conquered, and we see an invasion of New Zealand start to commence. Now both Australia and New Zealand are developed countries. New Zealand, though is militarily not the best, yet it's not the worst. Australia, though, is a reasonably strong power. So how then are many of their urban centers, right over here, just so suddenly taken over? Tasmania falls. Let me make that more clear. And we see Perth is taken over. So, what's really happening here? Well, India, Southeast Asia, most of Africa, they're all ganging up on Australia. They're sending their militaries toward this unified front, and as a result, this is this is so far working out quite well for them because Australia is a significant power and it seems as though they're going to take them out of the war pretty quickly. In North Africa, we see that the Europeans are making a swift advance. Morocco loses a lot of valuable territory, and Algeria is soon to follow. Nearly half of Tunisia is quickly taken over. However, this advance is stopped by several armies from West Africa, which, though don't repel the invading forces outside their continent, do keep them at bay. Moving on to the oceanic theater, we see that New Zealand has capitulated, and Australia, it looks like, is soon to follow. Because as they lose major cities, one can only wonder how long until they break. But for now, despite a lot of their valuable territory being taken out, with Indonesia making several swift landings across the north, we see that it's really looking hopeless for Australia. So yeah, let's just color in a lot of this territory here. They take out the coast. And yeah, it's not looking good. They're taking over this area. Now this coast is removed. And at this point, Australia has had enough. They surrender, and this is a major loss for the developed countries team. However, the developed countries experience a win in the Balkans. As this divide and conquer plan, it goes pretty successfully and this region quickly falls. However, from here, the front line is much more stagnant. In the Americas, the US continues to push into Central America and even make some advances into Mexico. They go into Baja California over here, cut it off from the rest of Mexico, and they slowly march into the rest of the country, which is no easy task, given the geography of this region. But yeah, even for Mexico, its fate also looks grim right now, because Central America has been taken out. The US is making some landings in Venezuela and Colombia. Yet, in South America, the United States is stopped by Brazil, who halts their forces. Africa was able to liberate itself, and they're starting to march into southern Spain. And we see a core theme being enforced here. The developing world is now starting to focus inward. It's closing in on Europe. Europe will definitely be able to hold out strongly. We see it's getting clear that Europe is being pushed back here. The front line eventually boils down to something like this. In the Americas, the South Americans are able to push back to a remarkable degree. Parts of Guyana and Suriname are liberated till the coast, really. Mexico is able to hold out this front line, though how long? And overall, these South American countries are able to push back US troops. And it is here we see the front lines reach a balance, a stalemate. What will the future of this war look like? Initially, it seemed as though the developed countries had an advantage. Then the developing started to push back. So now things are looking pretty even. Yet, where does the scenario unfold from here? Will the developed countries win, or the developing ones? Now, at this point, there are so many ways the scenario could go. Obviously, I can't cover them all, but here is one possible and likely scenario which could emerge, and one where we see a clear winner. In Europe, we see a sweeping invasion of the continent, and overall things aren't looking good for the developed countries. Now, obviously, this is just one scenario of many, and at the end of the day, this scenario is inherently unrealistic. I mean, why would the world's developing and developed countries really go to war? But anyway, this signifies a clear winner, and that winner is the developing world in this scenario. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Be sure to check out some other content. More specifically, you can see a video over here. If you like this video, you may enjoy that content. I'll see you in the next one.